Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the trustees of the Chennai International Center, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's program, a conversation between Mr. P. Chidambaram, former finance minister, and Mr. N. Ram of the Hindu. Chennai International Center, as you know, has been promoting diversified thought leadership through its outreach programs. As a part of our ongoing series, this is our 70th program. And at this program, we are honored to have two distinguished personalities with us here. Mr. Chidambaram, former finance minister, and Mr. Ram, a veteran in the field of journalism. Mr. Ram is also one of our patrons at CIC. I know you're all very eager to listen to their conversation, so without much further ado, let me hand over the stage to Mr. Ram and have a good evening.
Good evening. The format of this event will be as follows, and I've discussed it with Mr. Chidambaram, and he's fine with it. He'll make an opening statement, a brief opening statement, and then we'll have a conversation for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, depending on how it goes, and then we'll throw it open to all of you to raise questions. The conversation will cover the economy, politics, and the state of institutions. And we'll try to address the question, where are we headed? That's the title. The current national situation, where are we headed? And I propose, after the opening statement is made, to intersperse questions about the economy and politics, and also to bring forward what is most topical, depending on, based on the opening statement. So may I now invite Mr. Chidambaram to make his opening statement.
Mr. Ram, members of the Chennai International Center, distinguished guests, friends, the 70th Republic Day will be celebrated on January 26, 2020. 70 years is a long time to redeem the promise of the struggle for independence. At the very least, abject poverty should have been reduced to the absolute minimum, say 3 to 5% of the people. In terms of economic status, India should have become a middle-income country with a per capita of about US$ 4,000. Intrastate and interstate issues should have been, by and large, resolved. The use or misuse of religion in politics should have been ruthlessly curbed and the state declared as truly secular. Free and fair elections should be a given. An elected government should complete its term, and the opposition should be allowed to criticize the government freely and fearlessly. The media must be at the forefront of defending freedom, especially the liberty of an individual, and exposing cant, hypocrisy, and corruption. All institutions must be truly independent and able to discharge their functions without fear or favor. Undoubtedly, there have been impressive achievements, such as remaining a democracy. Remaining a democracy is indeed an achievement, and never succumbing to a military rule or a military-dependent government. Rise in life expectancy and literacy, reduction of poverty, acquiring a significant place in various fora, especially in the world's multilateral trade and finance bodies, and making a bold entry into the exploration of atomic energy, space, and other sciences. However, measured against the lofty targets and goals that I set out earlier, India has fallen woefully short. The biggest failure has been our underperformance on the economic front. Success and failures apart, where do we stand today? And that's the conversation this evening. Where do we stand today as the year 2019 draws to a close? Firstly, the economy. There has been a flood of bad news practically every day. Manufacturing output has shrunk 3.8%. Exports are down. Imports are down. Credit growth is down. Investments are down. Food inflation is at 10.01%. The wholesale price inflation is at close to 2%. And the consumer price inflation at 5.54%. Today's bad news, and I literally mean that, today's bad news is contained in the research paper jointly authored by Arvind Subramanian and Josh Feldman and not reported by the media. Their conclusion is damning and distressing, and I quote, "This is not an ordinary slowdown. It is India's great slowdown, where the economy seems headed for the intensive care unit." And I repeat, the economy seems headed for the intensive care unit. Need I say more? When the conversation starts, we can discuss the subject more. Secondly, the polity. The BJP won a renewed and stronger mandate in May-June 2019. In the first 7 months, that mandate has been used to address issues that are far, far removed from the concerns of the ordinary person, but close to the heart of the RSS and the deeply conservative right wing of the political spectrum. These are criminalization of triple talaq, the 1,600 crore rupee NRC exercise in Assam, now scrapped for all practical purposes, the repeal of Article 370 and dismembering of Jammu and Kashmir, and now the rushed enactment of the Citizenship Amendment Act. Indian politics is more fractious today than what it was a year ago. Political stability is weaker and more vulnerable than what it was a year ago. Thirdly, social stability and peace. Not since the turbulent weeks and months since partition has there been such deep distrust and division among the people. Every day, by words and deeds, a systematic effort is being made to pit the Hindus against the Muslims. Can there be anything more tragic than the vilification of a Muslim scholar who was qualified and therefore selected to teach Sanskrit in a faculty of the Banaras Hindu University? The fire is spreading across states. Universities have shut down. People have been killed, and fear and uncertainty are widespread. Worryingly, the world has begun to take note of what is happening on the streets of India. Witness the cancellation of visits by high dignitaries, including the Prime Minister of Japan, the statements of the committees of the United States Congress, and the indictment by the UN Human Rights Commission. I despair when I ponder over the question, can broken relationships between communities be ever restored? Fourthly, institutional capture and institutional breakdown. As hard as one can see, there is no sentinel on the qui-vive. Many institutions have abdicated their responsibilities. The steepest fall have been in the cases of the Election Commission and the Reserve Bank of India. The Information Commission has been wrecked. Other bodies seem to serve literally at the pleasure of the government. There is fear everywhere. Silence is a refuge sought by individuals and organizations. The media, unfortunately, is not excluded from this conclusion. although there are flashes of exception in the dark surroundings. Fifthly, law and order. If it was Unnao some months ago, it was Fatehpur yesterday, it is Mao today. As the killing fields spread seemingly without stop, another city or town or village will capture the headlines tomorrow. Few believe that the government intends to put an end to the horrendous crimes of rape and murder and lynching. Even fewer believe that the justice delivery system will render justice. Impunity lords over justice. The silence or tolerance of the rulers strengthens the sense of impunity. This, my friends, is my take on the current situation in India. I'm willing to open a freewheeling conversation, and I'm willing, if the moderator permits, to take questions in both English and Tamil. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You couldn't have heard a more succinct presentation of where we are and where we seem to be heading. If I may start with what is most topical now, and I'll plan to intersperse the economy questions and the political issues. Let me start with the Citizenship Amendment Bill 2019, which has now been enacted as a law. You made a 7+ minute speech in the Rajya Sabha on the CAB, that is the Citizenship Amendment Bill 2019, and I found it to be the most succinct and neat challenge to the constitutionality of the legislation that I've heard or read. Since many in the audience may not have been through that yet, may I request you to give us a brief idea of why you have concluded that this is unconstitutional and whether there's any update on the matter. We note that mass protests have occurred in several states. Some parts of India are burning, and repression seems to have been unleashed on the protesters.
Okay. Now, the bill is what in law we call a suspect bill. I mean, nobody at this stage can say with complete certitude it is unconstitutional. We call it suspect bill. It is suspect because the classification is suspect. Article 14 of the Constitution has 3 aspects. One is the well-known one, that there has to be reasonable classification, otherwise it violates the rule of equality. The second is the classification must have a nexus to the object sought to be achieved. You can always classify, but the classification must have a nexus to the object sought to be achieved. And the third dimension, which the Supreme Court has introduced in the last decade or so, is that it cannot be arbitrary. It has to conform to principles of constitutional morality, universal rights, basic human rights. These are the unwritten laws of a civilized society.
Judge-made law?
Judge-made law included. Now, this bill is clearly suspect. What does it do? It picks 3 countries, neighbors, leaves out the others. It picks 6 communities, calling them minority communities, leaves out the others. And then says, if you belong to one of the 6 communities, and if you come from one of the 3 countries, I will, in my executive discretion, declare you are not an illegal migrant. Once you are not an illegal migrant, you are entitled to become a citizen of India. Now look at the absurdity of this permutation and combination, 3 and 6. Hindus are included, but Sri Lankan Hindus are excluded. Why? Christians are included, but Bhutanese Christians are excluded. Why? There was an earlier cutoff date, June 1948. The Assam Accord had another cutoff date, 25th March 1971. Now even new cutoff date, 31st December 2014. Now in Assam alone, 19 lakh people have been identified as illegal migrants because they came with a story which was rejected. The story was, I was born here. Or the story was, my father was born here and I'm his descendant. The story was, my grandfather was born here and I'm his descendant. I don't have papers. Now today, this man has to tell a different story. He has to tell the story that I belong to one of the three countries. I was religiously persecuted in this village or this town. Because of religious persecution, I came into India. Now please declare me not as an illegal migrant. Now obviously, the story he said earlier, which was rejected, and the story he's going to say now, one of them is a lie. Which story is a lie and which story is the truth? There are so many infirmities in the bill that we are pretty certain, many of us are pretty certain, Soli Sorabji, Justice Madan Lokhu, retired, Justice Santosh Hegde, retired, have all felt that this is unconstitutional. The most weighty argument is there is something known as constitutional morality. It has been developed as a doctrine by the Supreme Court. It was developed in the Aadhaar case. It was developed in the Puttaswamy case on privacy. It was developed in the Delhi government was as LG, Union Territory of Power, Union Territory of Delhi. The constitutional morality. What is the constitutional morality in effectively, net? Just apply. You apply the CAB first or apply the NRC first. If you apply the NRC first, all of them will be excluded and the non-Muslims will be included through the CAB door. If you apply the CAB first, the CAB will include all the non-Muslims and NRC will keep out only the Muslims. So the net result is only the Muslims will be kept out. This is constitutionally immoral, which is why the United States House Foreign Affairs Committee and the UN Human Rights Commission said, citizenship based on religion is against the basic tenets of a democracy. Citizenship is universally based on the principle of jus soli, J-U-S-S-O-L-I, the principle of territoriality. Anybody found within the territory of a country is a citizen, unless this, of course, is disqualified. Only Israel is based on the principle of religion, maybe one or two other countries. We are based on the principle of territoriality, which we think that this bill is suspect. When I listed these questions, and I was hoping somebody will answer, well, nobody has answered it.
Yes, you listed 6 questions, but you also made another point about the responsibility, or rather the irresponsibility of Parliament in pushing this matter to the lap, as you put it, to the lap of the judges. How serious is that in terms of demeaning Parliament?
This is becoming more and more of a pattern these days. See, you elect us to make laws. We are elected representatives, which means you are making the law, effectively. In a representative democracy, you are making the law. The maker of the law must pause to ask himself, is he making a constitutional law? He can't make any law and then say, I have made the law, I don't care whether it's constitutional or not. Let the unelected judges decide. I have great respect for judges and let them decide. But as an elected representative, the maker of the law, am I not obliged to ask myself, am I satisfied this law is valid? I think elected representatives abdicating completely their responsibility. See, a bill like this cannot go through the British Parliament in less than about 2-3 weeks. You saw what happened to Johnson's Brexit agenda calendar. He could not push it through within even a week. We passed the bill in the cabinet on Sunday evening, introduced in the Lok Sabha on Monday morning, passed on Monday midnight, introduced in Rajya Sabha on Wednesday morning, passed at about 6 o'clock in the evening. A bill of this nature, which completely changes the basis of citizenship. After 70 years, the very fundamental basis of citizenship is changed from territoriality to religion. Can it be simply passed by elected representatives without even reflecting whether this is constitutional or not? So I said, what are you doing? You are abdicating your responsibility in favor of judges. I'm a both parliamentarian and lawyer. You don't respect my view as a parliamentarian. I have no option but to go as a lawyer before another forum.
You charged, in fact, that a small part of the Constitution is sought to be wrecked and demolished by this insidious bill.
See, there are provisions in the Constitution for citizenship. That is expanded in the Citizenship Act, sections 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Citizenship by birth, citizenship by descent, citizenship by naturalization, citizenship by registration, and citizenship by acquiring territory. 5 modes of acquiring citizenship is explained in the Act. Now, this Act fleshes out the constitutional provision. Now, what are you doing? The constitutional provision is based on territoriality. It's fleshed out in 5 sections. You are now introducing an insidious principle of religion and wrecking the Constitution through the back door. If you had a 2/3 majority, the government would have amended the Constitution. Thank God you did not give them a 2/3 majority. If you had given them a 2/3 majority, they won't make this amendment law. They will amend the Constitution. But you are wrecking the Constitution through the back door.
Yes. Over the years, some parts of the Constitution perhaps have been chipped away, the secular nature of the Constitution. But nothing like this has happened before, has it?
No, I know of no provision of the Constitution which directly introduces the principle of religion as a consideration for something or other. Religion as a consideration for citizenship. Now, tomorrow, if they introduce religion as a consideration for electability, if they introduce religion as a consideration for holding a constitutional office, if they introduce religion as a consideration for anything, and I hope they won't go to the absurdity of saying a consideration for a ration card. How can you introduce religion as a criterion for citizenship or electability or holding a constitutional office?
Yes. Now, on the question of divisiveness, Hindutva, challenge to the idea of India, all of which you have raised, either in the Rajya Sabha speech or elsewhere, or here in the opening statement, can they get away with it, do you think?
They are. They seem to be getting away with it, at least in the Hindi-speaking states. You see, the BJP's footprint has actually shrunk. There was a very interesting 2 maps. The BJP ruled states about a year and a half ago, and the BJP ruled states. It has shrunk. It's really in parts of the Hindi-speaking states. If you say Maharashtra, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Telangana, leave out Karnataka for the time being, Orissa, Bengal, the BJP is not ruling these states. Even in the Hindi states, it is not ruling Rajasthan, Punjab, Chhattisgarh, and Madhya Pradesh. It's there. But in the parliament election, they swept the Hindi-speaking states. The arithmetic of India's elections is, if you win 7 states, you can rule India. All you have got to win is 7 states in India. If you have an overwhelming majority in 7 states of India, you can rule India. Now, in these states, the Hindu agenda, the Hindu Rashtra agenda, is being pushed aggressively. These are the states where there is a clear, let's say, animosity between Hindu and Muslim communities. That's not so in the south. Not nearly anywhere near like that. There may be some pockets here, but in the North Indian states, there's great animosity between Hindu and Muslim communities. They practically live in compartments in villages, and even in cities, Muslims live apart from the Hindus. They live together, but they also have constant friction. The north and northwestern states are the states affected by the wars of India, which over the years. These are the states which are affected by migration at the time of partition. See, fortunately, West and South India were completely outside migration and outside wars. The two calamities never hit us, which is why there's greater tolerance here between Hindu and Muslim communities. Now, taking advantage of the fact that there is latent friction between Hindu and Muslim communities, they are pushing the Hindu agenda, Hindu Rashtra agenda, aggressively in these states. And the fallout you can find in other states, Meghalaya, Manipur, Tripura. The fallout is there. They look at how they have used the first 7 months of the second term. This is my distinguished friend Shivaraman here. I mean, anyone passionately concerned about India should list. What should you list? I've got a renewed mandate. What is my first priority? Growth. What is my second priority? Investment. Third, employment. 4, rural wages and rural welfare. Consumption must rise. In the 7 months, look at the agenda they have taken up. I listed it in my opening remark. Look at the agenda. The first was criminalization of triple talaq. Second was Article 370. The third was the now infructuous NRC exercise on Assam. And the fourth was the CAB. Why? Are these the most pressing concerns? You are all middle class, upper middle class. Are these your concerns? I've spent a lot of time with very poor people. Are these their concerns? I meet a lot of people, young people. Are these their concerns? They may be concerned, but they are lower down in the priority, far lower down. Address issues which concern people. Instead of that, they have spent the last 7 months expending a huge amount of political capital and political energy on issues which are far, far removed from the minds of the people. Why? To push the Hindu Rashtra agenda of the RSS.
And this takes us to the area of the economy.
Yes.
I think a lot of people would be interested in hearing you on this.
Arvind Subramaniam was the chief economic advisor until last year. He did not part amicably. He left a disappointed man because they were not willing to listen to him. And what has he said today? The paper, I got it last night. They are all in Nimrana. The paper was published, I think, 2-3 days ago. But why is the media blacking out this paper? It's a trenchant paper by Arvind and John Feldman, with data, graphs, arguments. And what does he come to the conclusion? He says, this is not an ordinary slowdown. We've had slowdowns. 2001, 2002 was a slowdown. Yashwant Sinha was finance minister. 2008 was a great recession, the global financial crisis. I was the finance minister. 2012-13 was a famous taper tantrum. I was the finance minister. We've had slowdowns, but this, he says, is not an ordinary slowdown. This is the great Indian slowdown, and the Indian economy seems headed for the intensive care unit. Can you have stronger language than that from a former chief economic advisor? The minister says, all's well in India. I'm in complete command and control. Maybe because she doesn't eat onions. This is a grave situation.
They say the problems are cyclical, with the implications that they are in the natural order of things. And you said there's a small mercy in your Indian Express column, which you resumed after 160 days in incarceration. You said that it's a small mercy. They haven't said it's seasonal. And therefore...
See, this is the fundamental problem of this government. It lacks talent. I can't comment on the political talent. And I'm not even envious that we are not in government and they are in government. Whatever political talent they can assemble, let the Honorable Prime Minister assemble the political talent. But if you are short on political talent, you have to hire non-political talent. And non-political talent is available in abundance in this country, abundance in this world. Indians, Raghuram Rajan, Abhijit Banerjee, even Arvind Panagriya, Arvind Subramanian. Abundant talent is available. Why don't you hire talent? Let me take you into a secret. Dr. Manmohan Singh, at any given time, said, we must have 6 economists somewhere in the system that you can talk to privately, tap into whenever you like. We always had 6 economists. Many of you may have forgotten the names. Let me remind you, at any given time, in the 10-year period 2004 to 2014, we had a minimum of 6 distinguished economists somewhere in the system. Dr. Rangarajan, Dr. Bimal Jalan, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Dr. Y.V. Reddy, Montek Singh Ahluwalia, Dr. Govind Rao, somewhere in the system, advisor to finance minister. We created a post just to have Vijay Kelkar there first and then Subhashish Gangopadhyaya and chief economic advisor, advisor to prime minister, chairman, Council of Economic Advisors, Dr. Rangarajan, Governor Reserve Bank, Deputy Governor Reserve Bank, Deputy Chairman Planning Commission, Member Planning Commission. We always had a minimum of 6 people. Now show me one person in this government who's truly independent, not simply holding a job, truly independent, and will speak to the Prime Minister. And I know that Dr. Singh used to invite 1 or 2 of them for breakfast or lunch and chat with them. And I would pick up the phone and ring up and say, listen, this is what somebody tells me, what is your view? And I remember Dr. Y.V. Reddy, I would say, Venu, you have to come to Delhi this Saturday and spend an hour with me. And he would come. He would just come and spend an hour. That is the kind of talent you have to hire. This fundamental problem of this government is it ignores Tirukkural. Noi nadi, noi mudal nadi, adan vai nadi, vai pachayal. You must find out what is the root of the problem. If you describe the problem as cyclical, you're doomed. This is not a cyclical problem. There are cyclical aspects to the problem, but this is basically a structural problem today.
That criticized the government for, quote, its stubborn and mulish defense of indefensible decisions taken in the past, which you list as demonetization, a flawed GST, tax terrorism, regulatory overkill, protectionism, and centralization of decision-making in the PMO. And the last point, you also say decisions are taken in the PMO and implemented in the finance ministry.
See, these are 5 major blunders of this government. They persist with it. 10 days ago, finance minister in the House says demonetization was right. Now, the IMF's chief economist, the lady, Indian lady, Geeta Gopinath. What did she say? And I'm quoting her. I have traveled across the world and I have not come across a single economist who has a good word for demonetization. But the finance minister of India says demonetization is right. We did the right thing. Now what do?
Won them votes, it seemed, in Uttar Pradesh.
Yes. How do you defend demonetization? Even after the catastrophic consequences of demonetization, if you continue to defend demonetization, why should I not call it stubborn and mulish? The same thing in the GST. Play back my speech in Parliament. I said, I beg you, GST world over is one rate. You don't believe me? Believe Arvind Subramaniam's report. The revenue neutral rate report where he recommended 14.5 to 15. That was high, but at least you could have had one rate. What did you do? You came up with 8 rates. I can't believe that a revenue secretary actually signed off on the file. How can a revenue secretary sign off on a file with 8 rates? I bet my last shirt Shivaraman would never have done that. How can you have 8 rates for a GST? And then you have a terrible implementation. I mean, I don't want to get into the details. Many of you are businessmen. Even today, the 2 forms are not notified. There's a temporary form called 3B. And look at the judicial confusion added to it. The Bombay High Court struck down 3B as not a return. Supreme Court has stayed the judgment, not reversed it. Nobody knows what the GST compliance is. The third one is tax terrorism. It's undoubtedly tax terrorism. Talk to any businessman, he'll tell you the kind of notices they get. Even the junior most officer in the income tax department has the right to issue notices today. How can you do that? At one point of time, 2 years ago, they were threatening to issue 1 lakh notices. The capacity of the income tax department does not extend to processing 1 lakh notices. Then why do you issue 1 lakh notices? Every time a notice is issued, look at the flutter it creates in the board of directors in the company. You have to attend to those things. And then retrospective taxation. Look what's happening to the telecom companies. Let me caution you, you'll end up with a monopoly here. The two will sink. 35,000 crore and some 29,000 crore. Vodafone has already declared its intention. We'll pack up and go.
Regulatory overkill.
Look at what they've done to SEBI. Have you seen the new SEBI regulations? The SEBI regulations made in the last 5 years? Mind-boggling gobbledygook. You can't make out what the regulations say. There's regulatory overkill. See, there must be light touch regulation in many areas. There must be intense regulation in some areas. There must be prohibitive regulation in some areas. But you tar everybody with the same brush and say heavy-handed regulation. How does one do business in a world? How does one do business in a country? You criminalize laws. They're going to criminalize some more laws, I'm told. And today they have said they're going to impose import duties. Read Arvind's paper. Arvind says, don't cut personal income taxes, don't raise import duties. That's common sense when there is a recession. When there is a demand-driven recession, lacking demand recession, you don't cut personal taxes, which are progressive, and you don't raise import taxes, which are regressive, or GST, which is regressive. He says, don't raise it. Specifically says so. I said it in my speech. I said it in my column last Sunday. But they're going to do that. They're going to meet the GST council, is going to raise the taxes. They are doing exactly the wrong things. The consequences will be disastrous.
And centralization of decision making in the PMO.
Everybody in government knows there's only one place where decisions are taken. Every secretary has to report to the PMO at about 10:30 in the morning, take his brief for the day, come back and report to his minister at about 11:30. So most ministers don't even come to office before 11. But why? Why come? They only come at 11 because the secretary will come and tell them what the brief for the day is. I mean, ministers tell us privately, MPs tell us privately. Every brief comes from the Prime Minister's office. Cabinet notes are no longer drafted in the ministry. Cabinet notes, draft cabinet notes are drafted by the secretary and his joint secretary in the PMO. And the draft cabinet note, after vetting, comes to the minister. The minister simply signs off. Cabinet meetings themselves are extremely short because the Prime Minister has already approved the cabinet note. So what's there for the minister to say? It's a highly centralized system. Which is why Raghuram pointed out in his lecture, Rajan pointed out in his lecture, an authoritarian centralized system doesn't work. Because ideas, contrary ideas, talent that is spread all over the government simply gets suppressed. Nobody wants to say, why should you? I mean, I'm not going to be listened to. Why say it? Why say it? Which is why most directors and even joint secretary level is no longer IAS officers. Because they don't want to go on deputation from the state to the center. Because they're completely powerless there. So why go there? So they've got now, I'm not saying anything against those services, they've got Indian Forest Service officers, Indian Ordnance Service officers, all kinds of officers are occupying positions of director and joint secretary in key ministries. People who've never handled general administration.
On the question of recession, I was going to ask you, at what point can we realistically describe an economy as being in recession? You mentioned...
Technically, 2 quarters of negative growth.
In developed economies. Should our definition be...
That is the point. This is valid for a stable economy, a stable state economy. It's valid. 2 quarters, Germany, 2 quarters of negative growth, it is recession. But it doesn't apply to a developing economy. In a developing economy, the definition of recession is when growth is so low and it's declining. Look at our growth rates for the last 6 quarters. 8, 7, 6.6, 5.8, 5 and 4.5. 5 quarters of declining growth. Now, technically this is not a recession, but for all practical purposes, this is a recession. This is a recession. And we must therefore be alert and say, this is a recession and therefore let's do something about it. But if you say, there is a proverb in Tamil, you think that the world, the sun is set. The sun is not set, it's the cat which is closing its eyes.
You have interacted with the poor and the marginalized. Do you think the government, and also the previous government, did enough to address the problems of mass poverty, multiple deprivations and massive unemployment?
Not enough, and I concede that point. I think we were to some extent deluding ourselves by looking at the average level of poverty. When Dr. Manmohan Singh visited me, I told him, sir, Dr. Saab, in future, let's not talk about poverty being reduced to 20%. That's the national average maybe. But in the Hindi heartland, I think poverty is above 40%. It's abject poverty. So I don't think, it's like saying the average depth of the river is only 5 feet. Since I'm 6 foot tall, I can cross the river. Now if you cross the river, you will drown in the middle of the river, but the depth is 10 feet. So average may be 20%. But the reality is not. In the poorest parts of India, which is still part of our country, we belong to that country and we owe to that people to lift them. I think poverty is as high as 40%.
I won't go into the question of the rural economy. For that, it's best that you and MS Swaminathan, Professor MS Swaminathan, be in conversation. There's not enough time also. But if you want to make any comment on that quickly.
See, there are two things in rural economy which are very, very worrying. One, rural wages have come down. Arvind Subramaniam's last economic survey said for 4 years, rural wages have been stagnant. Real rural wages have been stagnant. Now there is evidence that rural wages have actually come down. Maybe this year the monsoon is good, it may pick up. Rural wages have come down. The second worrying fact is rural consumption has come down by 24%. They're already at a lower level of consumption. If that consumption comes down by 24%, is what the NSSO says, these are two very worrying things, which is why there's no demand. Arvind points out, and I had data earlier, practically in recent memory, non-durable, fast-moving consumer goods sales have declined. Non-durable, not durable. I can understand refrigerators, air conditioners, but non-durable consumer goods have declined. If rural consumption declines, if rural wages decline, I think rural poverty has deepened in this country.
One other question, the credibility of economic data has come under serious question, whether you're talking about unemployment, declines in rural and urban consumption, or mass or poverty.
Less said about it, the better. If there's an inconvenient truth, you suppress it. Unemployment data was suppressed last year. Sanitation data, where the survey showed 40% do not have access to the toilets, and 40% do not use toilets, is suppressed. Mr. Parameshwaran Iyer comes out with a statement saying, don't believe all that, what I say is correct. Now the Ujjwala has come out. 50% of Ujjwala connections consume 3.8 cylinders a year, which means they're not using the stove. They can't afford to use the stove. 3.8 cylinders. Average family should have 7 cylinders a year, 8 cylinders a year. 3.8. You saw the report today. So every inconvenient truth is brushed aside. Now, I don't have to add anything. Only last week, Dr. Rangarajan, along with another co-author, wrote a long piece, I think, in Indian Express, saying that this is dangerous. This divergence between statistical data put out by the government and other data is very worrying. Raghuram Rajan has flagged that. Our credibility in the world is under question. This is used to be said about Chinese data. Now they are saying this about Indian data. Now if our data is being questioned, who's going to take us seriously?
But did some of this happen during your government in some respects?
I don't know, we suppressed the report. If you remind me, if I have forgotten it, jogged my memory, I don't think we suppressed the report. Methodology, indeed, the base has changed once in 5-6 years. I have no quarrel with that. But here they have changed the methodology. And that methodology still is mysterious.
We have about 10 minutes for this segment. I thought I should raise the question of Kashmir, on which you have spoken, and also on, most important, the assault on free speech, the climate of repression, and also we don't want to let my tribe off the hook, the performance of the media during this period.
I'm very worried about Kashmir. 75 lakh people have been under a virtual seize since August 4. An 84-year leader, a former chief minister of Kashmir, is under PSA, and that case is not being heard. The habeas corpus petitions are piling up. They are not being heard. Now, the highest principle in a democracy is liberty of an individual. You know what Benjamin Franklin said. If you sacrifice a little liberty in order to get a little security, you deserve neither liberty nor security. Liberty of an individual is the hallmark of a civilized democratic nation. all other values, according to me, rank below liberty. Here are 75 lakh people denied liberty, denied internet, denied access to their families, denied classrooms for their children. They write exams, but they don't go to classes. Denied access to hospitals, denied the right to walk on the streets and shop and buy and sell. This is the biggest siege in India. This is a siege. And yet, our system is not outraged by the siege and protesting. And the government says again and again, everything is normal. How can you say everything is normal? How can you even use those words? You have a whole army occupying Kashmir. I'm not wishing that violence breaks out in Kashmir. I plead with my Kashmiri brethren, don't resort to violence and give up arms. A few people who are misled, give up arms. But I grieve with you that you are under siege. Your liberty is being taken away. That's why when I stepped out and breathed freedom, my first paragraph was on Kashmir. I said, this is completely unacceptable. This is not expected of a democratic country. This is not expected under a republican constitution. You have to give back that freedom to the people. And if there are some protests, we'll have to face the protests. If there is minor violence, you'll have to contain the violence and plead with them to give up violence and contain it. But you cannot suppress people. If this can happen to one state, why cannot happen in another state tomorrow? Then what is the moral right for you to talk about China and Uyghur province? What is the moral right to talk about Sri Lanka and north and eastern provinces of Sri Lanka? What is our moral right then? We have no moral right. I'm very worried about Kashmir. I try to keep in touch on the telephone. My friend Saifuddin Soz sent me an email and he said, it will take my PA 10 days to find a place where I can send this email. I hope this email you will get. And your reply, I don't know how long it will take for me to get. I sent him an email. I don't know if he got it. He's in detention. Why is my friend Umar in detention? I can't understand. Why is he in detention? He's the most pacific fellow I know. Why is Mufti's daughter hiding in another city of India? Mehbooba Mufti's daughter is taking shelter in another city in India. She's not in Delhi. Why? Why are these people denied access to their families? I'm very worried about Kashmir. The other issue you asked about is
the assaults on free speech and the climate of fear.
Look what's happening. Now, I know there's a sub judice, but let me be careful. What is this trial going on in Pune and Bombay against these activists? Sudha Bharadwaj is a terrorist. The other four are terrorists.
We hope those cases will be dropped now with the new government.
I hope so.
As
I
long
don't
as
know.
it
I
lasts.
sincerely hope so. I'm going to try. I'm a Maharashtra MP. But it shocks my conscience to say Sudha Bharadwaj is a terrorist. Sudha Bharadwaj may be a completely outraged citizen of India with very extreme views, but certainly she's not a terrorist, and the whole lot of others.
And a comment on the performance of the media. You touched upon it in your
I
statement.
did. I didn't exclude the media. I said the media is included in this indictment.
Why do you think they're so intimidated?
Because the reality is, The media today is not editor-driven, but publisher-driven. Most papers don't care who the editor is, as long as their advertisement manager is smart. Now, I don't blame the media because they lose on every copy they print. Every copy they print, they lose money. They have to live on advertisement. Many of them have gone online, but they have not monetized their online. And even the monetized part is a pittance. Google pays them a pittance. Google keeps most of it. So they have to advertise. They have to depend on advertisement. And the biggest advertiser is the government. One day I saw in Times of India, 16 pages of some land acquisition advertisement. No, that's a bonanza. There's no application of editorial mind. 16 pages that comes, I believe, in a CD or something. You just print it, feed it into the computer machine and print it. 16 pages. Now, I'm happy that they are making money. But you must write. And even the Times of India, let me compliment it, because I think it's the most establishment paper today. Even the Times of India today has said, reverse the CAB in an editorial. It's a rare occasion where I'll compliment the Times of India editorial, but let me compliment it.
The Hindu wrote quite
Hindu
strongly
wrote earlier,
against
of
it.
course. Hindu
The
wrote
others,
strongly.
Telegraph.
editorials.
Yeah.
Telegraph is the most anti-establishment paper.
And the TV channels?
Well, I think the regional channels are better. The Hindu has, I said, there are flashes of exception. Hindu has written a half a dozen to a dozen editorials which are quite thumping and challenging. But they also have to run a business in this country. They also have to run a business. The regional channels are better, I think. I think this guy, Ravish Kumar, and
Yes.
NDTV Hindu is outstanding. He doesn't care for anyone. He just speaks his mind.
I know a number of young men and young women. We meet them at our Asian College of Journalism, with which I'm associated. They go with idealism. They're strongly for freedom of the press. But when they go to the newsroom, the whole game changes.
Well, they're under instructions. I mean, I'm telling you, this is here Arvind Subramaniam writing a paper with John Feldman, drawing upon your own data, government data. He has given the source, graphs, and he's written a paper. Why is the media not publishing this paper? I think it was hinted at Nimrana. Then I got in touch with my friend Praveen, and I said, where is the paper? He said, it will be published in a day or two. I got it day before yesterday night or yesterday. I've read the paper. Now, this is available today. Why are the newspapers not highlighting this paper? They should. This is research, this is knowledge, this is content. It must be available to the people of India. Well, I think this is a argument you can't win or lose. There are constraints on newspapers. Within those constraints, there are exceptional performances. But by and large, the media has been a disappointment.
And on that note of questioning why the media, and by extension all of us, are not speaking out, whatever be your opinion on the issues that matter, why there's ultra caution in the public debate or discourse on these issues, I turn it over to questions. I'll be moderating the questions. Please keep them relevant and short. And please identify yourselves in every case so we know where the question is coming from.
My name is Rajagopal. I represent a group called Hindus for Human Rights, which has been formed in the USA to speak up for pluralism and democracy. My question is to do with Kashmir. I just spent a whole day with a family from Kashmir who have come from Srinagar to Pune. And as they were describing it, what the situation is, one of the references they made was, we have seen worse things before under the previous governments. Only the difference now is the amount of hatred, including the army raising apple orchards on a wholesale basis. So my question, sir, is the role of the previous governments, did they establish certain precedents in terms of what is happening in Kashmir that this government has built upon and made it worse? In other words, should Congress also not take the responsibility for some of the repressive measures that have become norm now? Thank you.
Is this some kind of inherited sin? If there was a government at that time which made mistakes, that government bears responsibility. Nobody is denying that Congress government at the center had made grave mistakes in Kashmir. The rigged election, which started militancy, the sacking of Farooq Abdullah. You can go back to the sacking of Sheikh Abdullah and incarceration in Kodaikanal. So you can go back. But remember, we opened a new chapter in UPA. Militancy was brought to the bare minimum. Just look at the graph. Look at the data. Number of infiltrations, number of militants killed, number of security forces killed, number of citizens killed, civilians killed, dramatically came down to single digit. We appointed interlocutors. For the first time, people came out and spoke to the interlocutors. I led a delegation joined by Arun Jaitley to Jammu and Kashmir. Thousands came to see us and poured their heart and feelings and said, this is what we want. We had started a new dialogue in Kashmir. That was interrupted in 2014 by the change of government. But this government, bless them, until 2015 they continued the same policy. It is only in 2015, for some strange reason, they changed course and went back to a muscular nationalist approach, which I say is wrong. Up to 2015, they were doing pretty well. And I, in fact, complimented the government for continuing the same policy of dialogue and negotiation and up to 2015. Since 2015, things have dramatically changed and drifted inexorably.
If I remember right, as a Home Minister, you advocated a reduction in the security.
We did reduce 10,000 central paramilitary forces were removed from Kashmir. 10,000. We removed all the roadblocks in Srinagar city. The then DGP and I rode in an unmarked jeep through Srinagar after the roadblocks had been removed. Nothing happened. Yes, there was a sense of apprehension for a few days, but things quietened down. And for the first time during 2012, 13 and early 14, people were on the banks of the Dal Lake as late as 11:30 at night. And bless the Modi government, they continued it up to the mid of 2015. I still don't understand why they changed course.
Yes. Yes, please introduce yourself.
I am Dr. Gopala Dwarkanath from Boston. So first of all, great privilege and honor to listen to such a brilliant lecture this evening. I have two questions, one on media, another one on economy. Regarding media in United States, this term fake news was never there before 2016. Now it's riddled with news. We don't know which is fake and which is real. We're unable to filter through that to get a reasonably accurate information. Does such a thing happen in India? Is that an issue?
Well, there's a lot of fake news here. A lot of fake news. And US also, there's always been a lot of fake news. Clinton-Trump election was full of fake news, and they used to run fake news as the news is unfolding and fact check on the other column.
The second one is a quick one on economy. You sounded very ominous, and this is not in a good situation right now. We are in India. Comparing it to the Great Recession, do you think if this is left unchecked, it would head towards being one of the great recessions in the Indian economy?
No, there is a recession otherwise in the world. There are many countries close to recession. A couple of countries are already in recession. There's a slowdown in global growth. But notwithstanding the slowdown in global growth, it's our duty to shore up our economy. And there are measures which can be taken to shore up our economy. We can't go back to 8%. When there's slowdown in global growth, you can't go to 8%. But you can at least anchor your growth at 6% or 6.5%. We're now down to 4.5. And remember the Arvind Subramaniam's other comment. This 4.5 is not the real 4.5. This is equal to the old 3 because the methodology has changed. But I'm willing to ignore that point. We have to shore up our economy so that we don't fall below 6%. Raghuram Rajan did some calculation and said, it's only at 8% you create net employment. At 6%, you perhaps maintain existing levels of employment. At 4 and 4.5%, you lose jobs. There's net unemployment at this level of growth. Therefore, it's very important that we maintain employment in this country. You don't lose jobs. So you must grow at 6%. And if the world turns, you grow at 8%, you create more employment. There are different levels of different consequences. No? How can you live with 4.5% in a developing country?
Evening. My name is Advan Adityan, and I'm from the Daily Thandi Group. My question is...
Where are you?
Yeah, right here.
Oh, right here.
The lights.
Right here, sir. Sorry.
It's being covered live and also...
Come here.
Oh, should I come?
Just come forward.
Yeah, come forward.
Yeah, there you are.
Yes. Thank you, sir, for this amazing opportunity. My question to you today is, where do we go from here? What responsibilities can the youth or media houses or other corporates take up to achieve this goal of liberty for all individuals?
See, this government is only 7 months old. It has got 4 years and 5 months. They have a massive majority, 303. So the reality is we have to live with this government. All we can do is try to persuade them, try to correct their course. That's all that in a democracy we can do. But if that fails, it will spill over into the streets. And then they'll be forced to correct course. I'm hoping that they will correct course through dialogue, through discussion, through debate, through reasoning. But if they are forced to correct course because of street riots, so be it. What can I do? It's similar to the Hong Kong situation today. The ruler doesn't listen to the people.
No, right there. He got up first after that. Please introduce yourself.
My name is N. Ravi, and I was wondering what the connection between two parts of what you said would be. That is,
Ravi.
the impact of divisive economic policies on the national mood and on the economy, quite apart from how the economy is managed. The impact should be obvious, but I'm asking this question only because of the experience in the United States, where despite Donald Trump's divisive policies, the economy seems to be doing well.
See, there's no comparison between the US and India. One of my earliest lessons I was told is don't compare numbers of US and numbers of India. For example, let me give you one example. We are obsessed with fiscal deficit, correct? Every revenue secretary will tell you, every finance secretary will tell you, sir, watch out the fiscal deficit. America doesn't care a damn about the fiscal deficit. They don't care a damn. But they are the reserve currency. Everybody puts his money there. Where does China put its money? Where does India put its money? We put it in America. So there's no comparing America and India. America is doing well because of its great universities, its great research capability, innovative capability, and the willingness to take risk. And people are investing in America. Other countries are putting their money in America. So America's economy is on autopilot, despite Trump. They create 288,000 jobs a month, 250,000 jobs a month. Trump is on his own trip. He knows that the economy is doing well, and he's on his own trip dividing his people. Who knows? He may get elected also again. Can't say. There was no comparing America and India. Here, unfortunately, every decision of government has an immediate consequence upon the lives of millions of people. If you raise GST, I thought this is a no-brainer. If you raise GST, will not demand be further suppressed? In a situation like this, you cut regressive taxes and you don't cut progressive taxes. But they're doing the exact opposite. For every decision has a consequence here, which is why all of us are worked up about the decisions they are threatening to take. And therefore say, please don't take these decisions. Hold consultation. Get people to advise you on the right course of action. If your chief economic advisor tells you it is cyclical, what can you do? You can only throw up your hands.
Ravi, do you have a follow-up question?
I was wondering if you could elaborate on the impact of divisive policies on the economy.
Divisive policies on the economy. You see, I don't think a divisive policy, a socially divisive policy, has a direct impact on the economy. But to the extent that there are sections of the people who are already the underclass, underprivileged, less access to education, less access to jobs, less access to services, less access to capital. A divisive economy will only make them more suspect, only make them more deprived. See, there's empirical evidence, huge empirical evidence, that in an interview, the Muslim candidate has less chance than a Hindu candidate. Now, you can't deny that. That's all empirically established. Now, a divisive policy will make the Muslim more suspect in the eyes of the other people. Even if he is genuinely excluded, he will say he's been excluded because he's a Muslim. So a socially inclusive policy will give them encouragement and hope. A socially divisive policy will dampen their enthusiasm and hope. That is the only connection I can make at the moment. I've not reflected on it deeply, between a socially divisive policy and economic consequences. It will happen. You go to a bank for credit. If you fan the flames of divisiveness, it's possible that most bankers will look upon many more Muslims with suspicion. It can happen in other walks of life. It's happening in housing today. In private housing, it's happening every day. Nobody wants to give a house and rent to a Muslim. In Ahmedabad, nobody can find a house for a Muslim except in the two areas which are populated by Muslims. Therefore, socially divisive policies have consequences in access to services and goods and jobs. I think they do have. Reflecting on it more, housing is a classic example.
PCU liberally quoted Arvind Subramanian as an experienced economist. In today's paper in Times of India, the other experienced economist, Arvind Panagaria, has said that all things are not all too bad. He has also had a lot of experience with the government, and he has given data that this type of depressions or depressions and peaks are not unusual. It has happened continually. You also mentioned it happened in 2001. Later, you gave the instance. Aren't you partial in selecting this as a lawyer or as a Ram as a journalist, in taking a one-sided view because of politics or other differences? No. Go to the case of your own politicians. Rahul Gandhi has been successfully calling the Prime Minister as a chore. And your spokesperson every day do the same thing without any concern. There is not a single word of appreciation of any of the aspects of the government. Say, like, for example, the health policy and things like that. Why are you all so one-sided, and aren't you contributing so much to the divisiveness of the economy, of the polity?
No, I deny your accusation. I read Arvind Panagaria regularly and religiously. In his criticism, Arvind Panagaria agrees with us. He's against increasing import duties. He's against raising GST. No. Therefore, he agrees with our criticism. What he's trying to say is, the criticisms are valid, but there is still a way out by doing this and doing that. Even today, he says, we can overcome the present slowdown by doing this and do that. Fine, do it. Hire him. Why did you fire him? Of course he was. Of course he was. Of course he was fired. Everybody knows that.
Jagdish Bhagwati, Professor of Economics at Columbia University.
Of course he knows. Everybody knows he was fired. Everybody in Delhi knows he was fired. Because he was questioning them on some areas, and he was asked to go. Then you will say Arvind Subramanian was not fired. The whole world knows Arvind Subramanian was virtually fired. I mean, fired in the sense that you go your way, we go our way. All I'm saying is we accept Arvind Panagaria, hire him tomorrow. Go by his advice, mend the economy, I'll be happy. You think I want India to be a basket case? I don't want India to be a basket case. I want India to be a prosperous country. Hire Arvind Panagaria. You can't have it both ways. You can't say Arvind Panagaria is right, but I will have nothing to do with him. How can you say that? You did mention about chore and all, but that's not the subject. But just as a side story, let me tell you, the word chore was first used against a sitting Prime Minister by the BJP and others when Rajiv Gandhi was Prime Minister, where they coined the jingle, Gali Gali Mein Chor Hai. So don't forget history. The word chore against a sitting Prime Minister was first used against Rajiv Gandhi. I'm not saying this is correct, but equally you should say that was wrong.
Viswanathan, you might want to question your own thinking on one-sidedness. If people have come to a conclusion after their own analysis and so on, why would you characterize it as one-sided? They have clear views. He has views which may be different from mine on several issues, but on some issues you agree. So how is it one-sided? You have the other side broadcasting all the time.
Well, the other side is there on every channel every day.
Janathan, a chartered accountant. You mentioned 6 reasons as to why the current economic slowdown has come to be.
Actually, my column last Sunday Oh, you were talking about economic slowdown?
Yes.
Sorry.
You mentioned the 6 reasons. Yeah. You have mentioned it in your column, and you also prefaced it in your initial talk. You didn't touch upon the twin balance sheet problem of the banks because of the accumulated bad loans. And it's very evident that most of these bad loans happened during the previous regime. What is your comment on that?
Factually not correct. You see, we had a boom period. 2003-04, towards the latter half, to up to 2010-11. Investment was booming. Therefore, credit had to be extended. In fact, the latest paper, Arvind Subramaniam, talks about the 4 balance sheet crisis. You might be interested. Since you mentioned the TBS, it's now called FBS, 4 balance sheet crisis. Be that as it may. I asked in Parliament, I stood up and asked Mr. Arun Jaitley, please take the NPAs and tell me how many loans given during the Vajpayee regime have become NPA under the Asset Quality Review, AQR. Number 2, how many loans given to the UPA period have become AQR? And how many loans given after the NDA under Modi took over have become AQR? I said, break it into 3 parts and tell me the numbers. Until today, there is no answer. So where do you get the conclusion that most of these loans were given in the UPA government? Many of them were actually given in the Vajpayee government. And they may have been, what is that called? Evergreening. Some loans were indeed given under the UPA. There was an investment boom. When there's an investment boom, how can credit not go up? But many loans were given even under Mr. Modi, which became NPA. So without data, you can't come to that conclusion. And I've asked for data, and I've not got data.
Good evening, sir. This is Venkateshwaran
We have
from
time
Chanakya.
for 1 or 2 more questions, briefly. Thank you.
I have 2 questions. One is that தற்பொழுது நிலவும் பொருளாதார சூழலுக்கு தங்களுடைய அட்வைஸ் என்னவாக இருக்கும்? இப்போது இந்த சிச்சுவேஷனை சரி செய்ய வேண்டும் என்றால் அரசு ஒப்புக்கொள்ள வேண்டும் என கூறியுள்ளீர்கள். அதற்கு அடுத்தபடியாக தங்களது சஜஷன் என்னவாக இருக்கும்? நம்பர் 1. And number 2, இந்த சிட்டிசன்ஷிப் பில் அமெண்ட்மெண்ட் லாவில் திங் இஸ் தட் அதில் சொல்லியிருக்கிறது ரிலிஜியஸ் பர்சிக்யூஷன் சொல்லிட்டு, அதில் இந்த 3 நேஷன்ஸ்லையும் முஸ்லீம்ஸ் வந்து எப்படி ரிலிஜியஸாக பர்சிக்யூட் ஆகிறதுக்கான சான்சஸ் இருக்குது? அப்படி இருக்கிற பட்சத்தில் முஸ்லீம்கள் ஒதுக்கப்படுகிறார்கள் அப்படின்னு சொல்லி எப்படி சொல்கிறீங்க? தேங்க்யூ சார்.
2வது கேள்விக்கு எளிமையான பதில். பாகிஸ்தானில் Ahmadiyas, Hazaras and Shias are persecuted. Burma, Rohingyas are persecuted. Sri Lankan Indian origin Muslims are discriminated against, maybe even persecuted. அதனால் இஸ்லாமிய நாடுகள், புத்திஸ்ட் நாடுகளில் இஸ்லாமியர்கள் மீது பர்சிக்யூஷன் இல்லைன்னு நினைக்காதீங்க. இஸ்லாமுக்குள்ளேயே பர்சிக்யூஷன் இருக்கு. இங்கே தலித் மீது பர்சிக்யூஷன் இருக்குல்ல, இல்லைன்னு சொல்ல முடியுமா? தலித்ஸ் ஆர் நாட் பர்சிக்யூட்டட் யாராவது சொல்ல முடியுமா? ட்ரைபல்ஸ் ஆர் நாட் டிஸ்கிரிமினேட்டட் யாராவது சொல்ல முடியுமா? கேட்டால் தலித்தும் ஹிந்துங்கிறீங்க. அப்போ ஏன் தலித் மீது பர்சிக்யூஷன் இருக்கு? அதனால் பர்சிக்யூஷன் தான் டெஸ்ட்னா, irrespective of religion, whoever is persecuted, isn't it? I mean, that's one more argument. Your first question, என்ன யோசனை சொல்றது? யார் எங்களை யோசனை கேட்டா? யோசனை கேட்டா தானே யோசனை சொல்ல முடியும். பிரைம் மினிஸ்டர் வீட்டில இருந்து ஒரு கூப்பிட்டா கேட்கும் டாக்டர் மன்மோகன் சிங் வீடு. ஒரு முறையாவது இந்த 6 ஆண்டுகளில் டாக்டர் மன்மோகன் சிங் அவர்களை அழைத்து தனியா 2 பேரும், மற்றவங்களெல்லாம் கூப்பிட வேண்டாம், வாங்க உட்காருங்க சாப்பிடுங்க, 1 மணி நேரம் பேசிட்டு இருப்போம், என்ன பண்ணலாம்னு கேட்டிருக்காங்களா? ஒரு முறையாவது கேட்டிருக்காங்களா? எங்களையெல்லாம் கூப்பிட வேண்டாம். அப்புறம் ஒரு அறிஞர் தானே, பொருளாதார அறிஞர் தானே. Obama said, when Dr. Singh speaks, I listen. Why can't Mr. Modi listen? பிரைவேட்டா கேட்கலாம்ல, பிரைவேட்டா கூட கேட்கப்படாதுன்னு அது என்ன துவேஷம் எதிர்கட்சி மீது? Remember, when Mr. Narasimha Rao sent a delegation to the United Nations to explain our stand, he asked Mr. Vajpayee to lead the delegation because it adds credibility to the Indian case. You ask the leader of the opposition to lead the delegation. அவ்வளவு போக வேண்டாம், தனியாக கூப்பிட்டு மரியாதையாக உட்கார வச்சு சாப்பாடு கொடுத்து என்ன பேசிக்கலாமே. 1 மணி நேரம் பேசினா என்ன? யாருமே எங்களை கலந்து ஆலோசிக்கிறது கிடையாது. ஜிஎஸ்டி வரும்போது கெஞ்சினேன் அருண் ஜேட்லியை, ஏன்பா என்ன அவசரம், பில்லை கொடு, நாங்கள் படிக்கிறோம், படிச்சுட்டு அமெண்ட் பண்ணுவோம். பில்லை காட்டவே இல்லையே கடைசி வரைக்கும். கான்ஸ்டிடியூஷன் அமெண்ட்மெண்ட் பில்லை காட்டினாங்க, அதுலேயும் திருத்தம் சொன்னோம். ஒரு திருத்தத்தை ஏற்றுக்கிட்டாங்க, 2 திருத்தத்தை ஏற்றுக்கல. பில்லை காட்டவே இல்லையே, பில்லை பார்லிமெண்ட்டில் தானே காட்டினாங்க. ஏன் எங்களோட உட்காந்து பேசினா? சரி, இந்த பில் இருக்கே, என்ன அவசரம்? தெரியாமல் கேட்குறேன். ஏன்னா நாடு பற்றி எரிய போதா இந்த குடியுரிமை திருத்த சட்டத்தை 48 மணி நேரத்தில் நிறைவேற்றாட்டி என்ன ஆக போகுது? ஞாயிற்றுக்கிழமை அமைச்சரவை, திங்கட்கிழமை மக்களவை, புதன்கிழமை மாநிலங்களவைனா அன்னைக்கு ஜனாதிபதி எத்தனை மணிக்கு கையெழுத்து போடுறாரு தெரியுமா? மாநிலங்களவையில் பாஸ் பண்ணும்போது 6 மணியோ 7 மணியோ, 12 மணிக்கு கையெழுத்து போடுறாரு. எதுக்காக? மறுநாள் கையெழுத்து போடப்படாதா? Those are questions somebody must answer. Why can't you reflect on these? பில் வர்றதுக்கு முன்னாடியே சொல்கிறோம், அந்த சட்டத்தை கொண்டாடாதீங்க, கலந்து பேசுங்கன்னு. கலந்து பேசுறது கிடையாது. அதனால் யோசனை சொல்லணும்னா யோசனை சொல்லக்கூடிய இடத்துல அறிஞர்கள் இருக்கிறாங்க. யோசனை கேட்டால் தான் யோசனை சொல்லுவாங்க. இங்கே அபிஜித் பானர்ஜி gets a Nobel Prize and he makes a statement. What did he say? I quote his exact words. Somebody asked him, how is the Indian economy doing? He said it's doing badly. அவ்வளவுதான் சொன்னார், doing badly. Next day, Mr. Piyush Goyal pounces upon him and says, how can you say these things? What do you know about India? This Rahul Bajaj, as usual a maverick, he makes a mild protest. The next day, the finance minister says, you should not make these statements. This is against the national interest to make such personal statements. What is this?
My name is Suresh Subramaniam and I'm a chartered accountant. One of the significant achievements that this current government credits itself for is to the reduction of corruption. I just wanted your views on that, sir. Do you think that's a reality? Does corruption really come down? Or do you think it's only in the BJP-ruled states and not in the other states? What is your view on that?
I would tag along with it electoral funding.
If you think that corruption has come down, you're welcome to live in that make-believe world. Electoral bonds is legalizing corporate corruption. That is the most sophisticated legalized corporate corruption. It's like making a advanced deposit so that you can draw upon it at any time to get your work done. The donor remains anonymous from the rest of the world. The donee knows who the donor is. 95% of all electoral bond money goes to one political party. I'm not saying if the system remains in place, the next ruling party will also benefit. But the next ruling party will also be equally complicit then. Overruling the Reserve Bank of India, overruling the Election Commission, they introduced the electoral bond, which is why I said in my statement, the steepest fall is in the Election Commission and the RBI. As long as there is this electoral bond, which is legalized corporate corruption, how do you say corruption has come down? Now, leave the central government alone. Are you saying there's less corruption in a collector's office today and less corruption? Take your Ujjwala. You saw the data. There are Ujjwala connections where they've booked 28 cylinders a month. What else is it except corruption? 28 cylinders a month. A Ujjwala connectee. It's a small number, 3 lakhs. Petty corruption remains exactly where it was. Petty corruption remains exactly where it was. Maybe there is some fear about corruption in small transactions. But according to me, according to Jairam Ramesh, the Gujarat State Petroleum Corporation takeover was a clear scam. The sale of BPCL is a clear scam. The privatization of 6 airports, handing over to 1 licensee, was highly questionable. There are many, many instances. Rafale is a suspect deal. Who benefit, what benefit, we can't say. But it is clearly a suspect deal. But I think to generalize by saying corruption has come down, I don't believe that. You scrap the electoral bond and say this bonanza in favor of the ruling party will no longer continue. I'm willing to concede your point that perhaps there is, at the top level, less corruption. But the electoral bond is according to me, the apotheosis of corruption.
And on that note, may I thank our speaker, conversationalist, for giving us the time and answering every question, giving us an insight into his thinking on how India should get out of the present situation. Thank you very much. And
thank you all for coming this evening. Thank you. Thank you for your warm welcome and reception.
On behalf of the trustees of Chennai International Center, let me thank you, sir, Mr. P. Chidambaram, for being here and addressing our audience. Thanks to our senior patron, Mr. Ram, for being in conversation, and you all for joining us at the 70th program of the center. Chennai International Center is a community initiative where the fellows come together, and support towards programming, event management, and many more. And today, let me thank Hem Chandra Logan of Brand Avatar for helping us with the event, our own team, Sudhakar and Maitreyi, and the board and trustees and all of you. And a special thanks to Residency Towers for all the support extended. Thanks and have a good evening. Thank you.